Good morning, Morai v'Rabotai, Bruchim Habayim. We're continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah. We're on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph. The first line, the top line, today's Amud is being learned as a Zechut Refuah Shelema for Rachel Simcha Bad Nahid. That should have Refuah Shelema. Someone is also being learned as a Zechut Refuah Shelema for Daniel Moshe ben Farangis v'Avraham, Binyamin Bat Rina, Kayla bat Nazi, Sigalit bat Yafa, Levi Halevi ben Leah, Malka Chana bat Salcha Sipora, shall all have full recovery of Hashem Bezat Hashem. Amen. This Amud is also being learned as a zchut for the neshama of Shahin Esther Raud bat Yehuda, that her neshama should have an aliyah. Amen. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shei family. It should be an ultimate zchut for their mishpacha. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihya b'dvaro. Okay, so we started the discussion of Yom HaKippurim and why is it that we don't have a second Yom Kippur. We, at some point, should have a real discussion, historic and halachic discussion of why is it that they didn't fast second day of Yom Kippurim, right? We keep the Yamim Tovim at least before Hillel instituted the calendar the way we have it today, right? Like Rambam writes, until the times of Abaye Verova. It's a whole question whether it's including the generation of Abaye Verova, or whether it's up until but not including the generation of Abaye Verova. Rambam writes, until that generation, they had Kiddush HaChodesh Al Pi Re'iyah. They were not using a calendar, but rather they were using still the old system of Edim running to the Bedin and sending Shluchim out from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, even though the majority of the Torah maybe was already developing in Bavel in the time of the Amoraim. But this is how it worked, says the Rambam. So especially then, when you didn't have the calendar, so you have no idea when Yom Tov is going to be if you're not in the vicinity of the Bedin in Yerushalayim. You have no idea when it is. So therefore, you needed to send the Shluchim out. And therefore, people kept 2 days of Yom Tov on Pesach and on Shavuot and on Sukkot and even Shmini Atzeret. Imagine to yourself, you had Shmini Atzeret is the 22nd day, so to speak, of Tishrei, and even then, you would have Shluchim still going to tell people when it is, and still people kept 2 days because it would not necessarily get to everywhere. And in the same month, the 10th of the month is Yom Kippur. And boom, the Yom Kippur you keep 1 day. What's the difference? This is the Oraita. This is the Oraita. In fact, this is Karet. The other ones may not be Karet. Right? Okay, so you didn't blow the shofar, you didn't sit in the sukkah, Shmini Atzeret. Okay? Yom Kippur is Shabbat Shabbaton. How come they didn't do it? It's a question we have to deal with, right? It's a question that everyone has had in their mind, consciously, subconsciously. They definitely have been bothered the fact that why every Yom Tov is 2 days, and when it comes to Yom Kippur, all of a sudden, conveniently, we fast only 1 day, right? So we spoke about the Yeshiva of Shanghai, that the Talmidim that year, when they sent the question to Rabbi Yechim Kaczynski and to the Chazon Ish, before this became a massive machloket within Klal Yisrael, and the whole Sefer Tarikh Yisrael was written on halachic dateline, many of them fasted actually 2 days, right? They did the davenings at the Doraitas. The first day they did the davening. The second day they kept the Doraitas, right? The Drabanans maybe maybe not so much, but the fasting actually, they did. Maybe bed rest, but that's how they did it. Now, we will see in today's Amud that nothing really is new. In the time of the Amoraim, also there were people who actually did this. So it says, in the Gemara, top line, Levi, Ikla leBavel. Levi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Bechatzar beTishrei. The date on the calendar of Bavel was 11th day of Tishrei. Now, normally speaking, as we learned before, Elul would not be Meubar. Usually, Elul would not be Meubar, so therefore, the cheshbon of Bnei Bavel was that fine, so the 30th day would be Rosh Chodesh, and you count 10 days from that is Yom Kippur, the 11th day would be the day Motzei Yom Kippur, right? Now, it happened to be that year they actually had been Ma'aber the Elul. It's a very rare happening, right? Very rare happening. We mentioned that Mimot Ezra Va'adata, from time of Ezra Sofer until the time of the Amoraim, Lo Matzinu Elul Moubar, right? Which doesn't mean that it never, ever, ever, ever happened, but it means that it was almost never happened. It was such a rare happening. So this happened to be one of those years. So Levi is coming to Bavel, and everyone is making shish kebabs and so on. And he's like, oh, amazing. Basim Amar, he said, right? This is sarcasm 101. Basim tafshila de bavlai b'yom rabba ma'arava. So what an amazing smell of food I hear on the great day in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, today is Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael. So 11th of Tishrei was Yom Kippur because they were me'aber the el, so they were one day behind. So really, today was not 11th day of Tishrei in Eretz Yisrael, it was 10th day of Tishrei. Okay? So Amrile, they told him, wait, Ashid, you should give us a testimony. You were in Eretz Yisrael, so you should give a testimony that in Eretz Yisrael, you're not any less than a shaliach, right? They would send shluchim, you will be the shaliach. Testify that this year they were ma'aber de Elul, and we would fast today, right? He said, I can't do it. Can't do it because, as we'll see later on in the Gemara, for Tishrei and Nisan, you need, if you are not an official shaliach, you need to have heard it directly from the Sanhedrin, from the Beit Din Agadol. When they said Mekudash, you must have been there in order to be able to be masid. It was baked in the cake of this halachot, as we'll see later. So he tells them, Levi says, I was not, when they did this, I was not in the Beit Midrash, I was not in the Sanhedrin, I was not part of the announcement of the Chodesh, hence, I cannot be an ed, right? Now, what exactly is the pshat? How do you understand this? You have a whole community in Bavel. He comes to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, and he says, hey, today is Yom Kippur, because they were Ma'aber de Elul. So obviously he knows that they did that, right? He's not fabricating any information. He knows that they obviously did that, right? Now, everybody imagine how Obadia came from Eretz Yisrael to Los Angeles, and he says, oh, by the way, this year is Elul Meubar, so today's Yom Kippur. And then we have a technical question. He's like, well, can you be Me'id? Can you not be Me'id? So the halacha is, oh, I didn't hear it from the Beit Din directly, so I can't be Me'id. Okay. And now you're going to go on with your sandwich? Well, you know in Eretz Yisrael today is Yom Kippur, right? The fact is that, okay, there's a technicality of not being able to be made, but you at least know that in Eretz Yisrael today they're fasting, right? So would you be able to eat? There's Yom Kippur, right? How can they say, oh, well, please testify. No, I can't. Okay, Hazak Baruch, you know. How does that work exactly? So the Ritba asks this question. They shouldn't deal with this. the different opinions at how it's a nuanced question. And the Ritva says that this was part of the announcement at the Bedin in the beginning when this was made. The Gemara that we're going to see that whenever there is by Tishrei and Nisan, you need to have heard directly from the Bedin to be able to be made. What they meant also, part of that is, if you have a Yachid, whoever he is, even if he's Levi, doesn't make a difference, that comes and says something and he was not directly, did not hear it, he's not Ne'eman. It's as if he did not, that Edu doesn't exist. And you have no obligation, your Yidiyah, so to speak, of the fact that in Eretz Yisrael people may be fasting today, has no rendering of the halachot of Yom Kippur, because you are allowed to announce your own Yom Kippur, and in lieu of a legitimate announcement from the Sanhedrin, from the Bedin Yerushalayim, you will be going with the Rov, and the announcement of Yom Kippur in Bavel, in that case, would be Kovea da halacha when Yom Kippur is going to be, which is, it's a tremendous concept. We will again unfold this a little bit more when we actually do the Gemara of it. But just in case, for those of you who are thinking about it, how in the world they went on with their day, that would be really the insight, as it's discussed in the Rishonim, as the Ritva and the others mentioned. So says the Gemara, this is not the only story that happened, right? So first of all, he says, Amarehu, lo shamati mipi bedin mekudash. I did not hear the words mekudash from the bedin. I was not there, so therefore I can't do it. Now, Machri is Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan would announce, Kol hecha de matu shluche Nisan v'lo matu shluche Tishrei. You see, there is a discrepancy between the distance that the agents could travel when trying to make the announcement of Rosh Chodesh for Chodesh Tishrei and for Chodesh Nisan, for a very simple reason. Because Chodesh Nisan, as soon as the Bedin announces it, the Shluchim hit the road immediately. When do they stop? Only on Shabbat. That's what we learned in the Mishnah, right? Until Mamash, 18 minutes, they're going. They stop on Shabbat, right? Motzei Shabbat, and they're hitting the road, right? There's no other impediment, because there's nothing going on from Aleph ben Nisan until Tetvav ben Nisan, aside from Shabbat. However, on Tishrei, what happens? They announce it, the first day is Rosh Hashanah, the second day is Rosh Hashanah, then obviously you have the Shabbat, and then you have Yom Kippur, right? So there are a lot of stops. At least you have 3 extra dates there that are, so you physically cannot get as far by Tishrei as you would have gotten by Nisan. That's Pashut, right? Okay? So if that's the case, at least you'll have 1 day of difference. Perhaps 2 or maybe even 3 days. So, says Rabbi Yochanan, if you're in any of those places, imagine on the map, you have like a gray area. That's the area that Shluchim would get to in Nisan, would not get into on Tishrei, right? He says any of those cities and villages that are in that sliver of the map, they must keep Pesach also 2 days of Yom Tov. In other words, the Shaliach gets that place, says, today was Rosh Chodesh, Nisan was in X, Y, and Z day, right? So they say, Chazak Baruch. Now we have only an additional day of Chol HaMoed, right? So that Rabbi Yochanan, not so fast. You would have to keep 2 days of Yom Tov, even in those places, even though that they got the news. Why? Says Rabbi Yochanan. Those places that the Shaliach would get there in Nisan but wouldn't get there on Tishrei, they should still keep 2 days of Pesach, because if you have Nisan 1 day and then Tishrei by Sukkot and by Shmini Atzeret 1 day, right, then it becomes a mess. they're gonna get confused, mix up, and say we are really not. We are used to keeping one day. There'll be mekel in Yom Tov Sheni of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. So therefore, you can't let them do that. Now, two of the students of Rabbi Yochanan actually had a ma'aseh that they went to that sliver of a map, right? Says the Gemara, Rav Aibu bar Nagri, Rav Chia bar Abba, they went to one of those places that the shluchim of Nisan would reach, but not the shluchim of Tishrei. And they saw that on Pesach they were actually doing one day Yom Tov. So what did they tell them? The Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan, right? What did they tell them? Nothing. They said nothing, right? They didn't make a peep. Shama Rabbi Yochanan ve'ikped. Rabbi Yochanan heard about this, and he was makpid. He said, whoa, you're my Talmidim. Didn't you hear? Did I tell you? I didn't tell you. What kind of Talmidim are you if you don't act upon the learning that you have had from your Rebbe? Right? Fine. Another story where it says, Rava, and this is where it gets interesting. Rava have a ragil davoyati v'tanita treyom. Rava Taka fasted every Yom Kippur 2 days. Right? So we speak about Yom Kippur being 1 day. Rava would fast every year 2 day Yom Kippur. Sfeika Yoma. We have Sfeika Yoma by Pesach. We have it by Shavuot. We have it by Sukkot. We have it by Yom Kippur as well. Right? What's the difference? He would actually fast 2 days. Zim lachada ishtakach kivate. And 1 year taka became that Yom Kippur came out, that Yom Kippur was like him. Right? Just like we had this story of Levi coming to Bavel and saying, Rabotai, you're having shish kebab today's Yom Kippur, because they were ma'aber de Elul. One time in Rava's lifetime, it actually happened to be that the second day that he was fasting was actually Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael, because they were ma'aber de Elul, right? So he felt like, if I fasted all these years for that 1 year, that I didn't miss the actual Yom Kippur, dayenu, right? So one time it happened that, everyone else was fasting on Yud Be'elul in the Babylonian calendar, and it happened to be that Yud Elul in Bavel was really Tet Elul in Eretz Yisrael, because they were Ma'aber the previous Chodesh. Says the Gemara, we have to come back to this and talk about it, okay? Because we want to get back to the discussion of why in the world we're not keeping Yom Kippur twice, right? I see all the good ideas on the lips of people. Everyone seems to know the answer. Why it is that we keep every Yom Tov twice. When it comes to the karet, you're like, no, that one is like too hard to fast 2 days. Leave me alone, right? That's a massive question. Why in the world? Does anyone know why you're not fasting Yom Kippur twice? What? Right? And he's not that far from reality. I said everyone has good answers over here, right? So that's one of the things. But how about people who could? Right? There are many people. Arizal writes that if you fast twice, hafsaka is considered 27 fasts, right? And many good Sephardim have been doing this forever. When it comes to Yom Kippur, they fast 1 day, right? As if you can fast 2 days, why don't you just fast 2 days, right? If it's something like that, at least you should find every generation, many hundreds of Hasidim, Tzadikim, and pious individuals that they will do twice, right? 2 days. There are people who will fast 3 days hafsakot, right? So why can't they just do 2 days? Be bed rest, IV would help, maybe, we don't even try, right? So we got to talk about that. We got to come back to Rava and tie this with a bunch of other Gemaras Be'ezrat Hashem as well. But before that, Rav Nachman Yati B'Tanita Kula Yom Ad Kippurim. 1 year, again, Rav Nachman also in Bavel, he fasted the whole Yom Kippur. So now it's almost Motzei Yom Kippur. He has his sandwich ready with the ketchup and the mustard. The whole thing is ready. He's about to make hamotzi, and this shaliach comes from Eretz Yisrael, right? Shaliach comes from Eretz Yisrael. Ata gavra malel lemachar yom rabba v'marava. So tomorrow is Yom Kippur. This year they were ma'aber the Shana. So not only you didn't fast on Yom Kippur, you didn't eat on Tet Tishrei, which is a mitzvah to eat, right? Tomorrow, Mechila. Tomorrow is Yom Kippur, right? So Rabbi Nachman was very frustrated with this. Amaleh, he says to him, Mehechat, from what city do you come? From Eretz Yisrael. And he tells him, Amaleh, Midamharia, the city of Damharia. So Rabbi Nachman made a little notarikun play on the name of the city. Amaleh, Dam Tehe Acharito. He says, you're going to kill me with this. I'm going to die. I'm going to fast the second day now. Right? Dam Te'ah, saying it himself. He says, Dam Te'ah Charito. You're going to kill me with this psak that he just revealed to me that tomorrow is Yom Kippur. Couldn't you come 5 minutes later after the first sandwich? Like at least I wouldn't be fasting like Retzufot this way. Right? Now I have to fast 2 days back to back. Kari aleh, he read to him the pasuk in Echa. Kalim, no, this is really not Echa. We read it on Tisha B'Av. It's one of the lamentations of Yirmiyahu Hanavi in the beginning of Perek Dalet in Echa. Kalim hayu rotvenu minishre hamidbar. I think it says right. Minishre shamayim. Yeah, Kalim hayu rotvenu minishre shamayim al ha'arim delakunu. He read this pasuk that our enemies were faster than the eagles. He said, you got from Eretz Yisrael in 10 short days to mention this thing. It came so fast. The bad news came so fast. Now I have to fast 2 days in a row. Retzufot. So again, Mistama, he ended up fasting also 2 days. Again, we have to come back to this and discuss it because, again, if this person must have been, according to what we learned before in the story of Levi, that it must have been an official shaliach of Eretz Yisrael or someone that directly heard the Mekudash from the mouth of the Bedin. But nevertheless, Rav Nachman said, okay, fine, you have to fast 2 days. You have to fast 2 days. Which again brings us back to why don't we fast 2 days if we have the same Sfeika Diyoma based on the other Yamim Tovim that we keep 2 days. Fine. Says, well, you have to ask this, by the way, in 2 different levels. Nowadays, we keep 2 days Yom Tov midarabanan. We don't keep it midoraita because minag avotenu biyadenu. Gemara says, right? After having the calendar, we don't have Sfeika Diyoma the same way they had Sfeika Diyoma in the time of before Abaye and Rava's generation, when they did Al Pi Re'iyah. When they did Al Pi Re'iyah, the mamash was a safek, right? Is today Yom Kippur? Is tomorrow Yom Kippur? Maybe tomorrow is Yom Kippur, right? So it's a bigger question in the time of Re'iyah, when they're Mekadesh Chodesh Al Pi Re'iyah. Nowadays it's Darabaran, but still we keep all the other ones. So what Rabbi Eliyahu said, maybe a little bit more tangible nowadays. That it's too difficult because Rashi and Robatzi, maybe if the whole thing is the Rabbanan anyways, fine. So then, meaning Yom Tov Sheni is the Rabbanan, fine, maybe we could understand. But it seems to be that it never was a thing, even when they were Mekadesh HaChodesh Al Pi Re'iyah, which we have to come back to. Shalach le Rav Huna bar Avin Rava. Rav Huna bar Avin asked Rava. Kat Chazid, he didn't ask, he sent to Rava. Kat Chazid, the Mashchat Kfatevet at Shitzar Benisan. When you see that the Tkufa, which is Tkufa, is a period of time, is another way of saying in the language of the Gemara, seasons. Right? When the season of the 4 seasons, 4 Tkufot, when you see the Tkufa of Tevet is elongated until the 16th day of Nisan, which is the day after Pesach, Avda la'ushata, avra la'ushata, velo tachushla. You should make that year me'ubar, that means add a second adar, velo tachushla, and don't be worried that you're doing like a shitat yachidat yachid. This is really a Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Yud Gimal, that this is a dat yachid of acherim. Right, without getting into too much of the crux of this, basically, the dat of acherim is that we have seasons in the solar calendar, and those seasons you can calculate very easily, right? What day of the lunar calendar they fall to be, it's like, imagine solar calendar is always the same thing, right? Maybe a day off, in and out. By the way, what's coming up right now would be a good example of it. We start saying in Chutz La'aretz, we start saying Baruch Aleinu, the Sfaradim, Ashkenazim, V'tel Matari Bracha, when? Oh, everyone all of a sudden says a goyish date, right? Zayin B'Cheshvan is in Eretz Yisrael, right? For the Israelis in the crowd, right? Amazing. But everyone else is 4th or 5th of December. This is like the only time we have an English date on a Jewish calendar. Why is that? Because it's very simple. It's the 60th day from the Tkufa. It's the 60th day from the beginning of the season. So it always happens to be a English date. And why sometimes one day is off, right? Different story, right? But the dates on the solar calendar are very easy to find out. So lunar calendar is the one that's moving 11 days on some change every year, right? So if that change has caused that now the beginning of the season of spring, of Tkufat Nisan, happens to be after 16th of Nisan, says the Gemara, just make that Shana Meuberet, add a second Adar. This way, instead of spring starting in the 16th of Nisan, will start at 16th of Adar Bet, and then Nisan would be way after the beginning of spring, right? Why? Because the Gemara there says the Acherim hold, it says Shamor, I think, which the Gemara is going to say it right now, Shamor et Chodesh HaAviv, right? You have to keep Pesach. The full pasuk reads Shamor et Chodesh HaAviv v'asita Pesach Hashem Elokecha ki bechodesh HaAviv hotziacha Hashem Elokecha mimitzrayim laila. You should keep the month of Aviv. What's Aviv? Spring. Like calls Pesach, it calls Nisan in the context of keeping Pesach. V'asita Pesach Hashem Elokecha calls it Aviv, which means Shamor et Chodesh HaAviv. Keep it. Make sure Pesach always happens in Aviv, which is in spring. So therefore, says Gemara, if the beginning of Pesach happens to be beginning of the season of spring happens to be after the 15th of Nisan, then you're not doing Pesach in Aviv, right? The beginning of it is not in Aviv. So therefore, if it happens to be to coincide like that, you add an Adar to make sure that beginning of Nisan is always in Aviv, right? That's the Shita of Acherim. And it says, don't worry that this is Da'at Yachid. It's very mistaber, it's very logical, it's very solid. Halakha is like Acherim in that Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Yud Gimel, and therefore you will do that. Amalu Rab Nachman La'anav Nechuteyama. Rab Nachman tells these people who were going on a ship, Atun de lo yaditu b'kviyah de'archa. You are not bucky in kviyah de'archa, right? And also, you're nowhere next to the Bedin to know where the announcement is going to be. For months on end, you're going to be on the ship. You're counting the days, obviously, but you have no knowledge of the actual Rosh Chodesh. Says the Gemara, I will give you a formula based on looking at the moon to know when Pesach is. You have to burn your chametz, right? You have to get rid of the chametz. Ki chazitu siara de mashlim leyoma. When you see the moon shedding light up until the daytime and then disappearing, that is a siman that the month of the moon of Nisan has filled up, so to speak, and that's the 14th of the month, and therefore that morning you should burn the chametz. Get rid of the chametz, right? Be'iru chamira. Then you get rid of it, which be'iru chamira doesn't mean necessarily they would burn it, actually, right? Any way that you get rid of it is fine. Actually, a Braita says that the sale of chametz that we do nowadays, we learn from a Braita, for the people who are on a ship. But what are you going to do? You have all these food. You got to burn it, and you're going to die. And you got no food. There's no shopping centers, no stores to go shop. You have what you have, and then that's it, right? Now you can have extra things to so the Braita says they would actually sell their chametz to the goyim, whatever it is, and then afterwards they could maybe buy it. Every bit of food on a ship is a life-saving item. We learned the whole concept of Siman Taf Memchet in Shcharuch over there in Halachot of Pesach. The whole Siman there talks about Mechirat Chametz. It's all learned really from a Braita by people who were on the ships. But you have to get rid of the chametz, right? The ownership of the chametz. So how do you know when to get rid of the chametz? It's just when you see the moon is big enough that it lights up until the morning. That's the siman. That's Yudalet ben Nisan, and that morning you need to get rid of the chametz. Says the Gemara. Wait a second. V'ha'anan. Says the Gemara, sorry. Be'iru chamira. So, emat mashlim. When does it, complete? Bechamesar. The Gemara says, how can you tell them that? It only becomes full that until the morning, mamash, you see the light on 15th of Nisan. 15th of Nisan is one day too late for burning your chametz. It's Pesach morning already. You're burning your chametz Pesach morning. There are two problems with that, right? First of all, you're burning. Secondly, you have chametz on Pesach, right? We need to burn it on 14th, not on 15th. The Gemara says, no. For them, they don't have any, they have a clear sky. They don't have any light pollution. For those of you who have gone to Yosemite up on the mountain, when there's no artificial light, like you go out at night and you see thousands and thousands more stars. Like, it's not even comparable, right? 10 times more stars. It's not that they have more stars over there, right? It's just that we can't see it because of the light pollution, because of all the other issues that we have with the blockage of the light pollution. It's not a clear sky in the same way, right? So it says, Rav Nachman, no, in the sea, actually, on the ship, they could see every bit of light. So therefore, already from the full moon, from the 14th, they will see that's the first day that they will see it until the morning lighting up, and therefore it will be an accurate siman for burning their chametz on the morning of Erev Pesach, and we'll Be'ezrat Hashem continue this in the days to come.